And yes, we should be ready. I'm David Radcliff. Where am I talking? Am I talking to the camera up there, kind of? Or just talking to the group here? Okay, fine. You got to know who your audience is, you know. I'm David Radcliff, work with New Community Project, and we're a small Christian organization with a big goal to change the world. And you all kind of know about us. This congregation's been very supportive of our work over the years, and I've had the privilege of coming here every 2 or 3 years, it seems like. I get my foot in the door and they let me in and to come and do something of some kind. So I was really happy to be here on this special Sunday, Graduation Sunday. I thought I was here probably not even 2 years ago. So I'm going to try to share some things that have happened with us since then, because I know some of you may have heard some of those things back in those days. And especially with regard to COVID, but also a couple of other initiatives that have been kind of interesting for us since I saw you last. So let's just get right going so we can get a picture up. We're going to start off down in Virginia, Harrisonburg, not Harrisburg, where we have one of our sustainable living centers there. So go ahead. We produce food in these places that we have, these 2 centers we have. And when COVID hit, food was a needed commodity in many places, especially among poor. And so here we kept our food processing. This is last fall. We got it going again this spring, of course. But we were producing fresh organic vegetables for school lunch programs and for low-income housing areas. So trying to adapt it, and we're masked up. And those 2 women on the right are immigrant workers who lost their jobs in the hotel industry when COVID hit, because nobody was traveling. And we got a grant from the United Way to hire them to work with us in Harrisonburg. So it worked out pretty well. We also, in the past probably 18 months, have helped this woman and her son rent to own a home. And maybe you've seen the statistics that the average white household has 10 times the wealth of a black household. And a lot of that has to do with home ownership and whether you built up a little reserve in your home purchases and sales over the years. And a lot of African American people have not. So Lisa and Tyrell, we arranged some financing for them, and they're renting to own a home. It's just sort of a little sidelight, you might say. Not a sidelight to her, but we're not in the home business, but it was an opportunity that presented itself. We also just recently have been given access to over 40 acres of land. There's Tom, our director there in Harrisonburg. 40 acres of land to make a carbon farm. In other words, agriculture is responsible for about 20% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to reverse that quickly because we're going to need more food as time goes along, and more greenhouse gases is not what we need. And plus, greenhouse gases affect food supply because you get hotter and drier and floods and all that stuff that comes with climate change, and it affects your ability to grow food. So it's kind of an unvirtuous circle. So this is back in February when I happened to be passing through, but we're going to use systems that help the soil sequester the carbon rather than release the carbon. We're going to put riparian buffers along that stream there. I know here in Pennsylvania, you've got a lot of streams that the cows are in. I mean, I see them. That is not good for the streams or for the cows either, I understand. But it's hard to keep them out, and people don't want to go to trouble. They plant their crops right up to the boundary of the streams, and then fertilizers get in, and soil washes off, and all these things. So we're going to do a number of things on this site to help sort of show how to do farming on a little bigger scale, but in an environmentally sustainable way. Because we do small-scale stuff at our centers, now we have an opportunity to show the Mennonite and Brethren and other farmers around there another way they can still make money and protect the land over the long run. Up in Vermont, we still are doing our food gathering from Trader Joe's. Those big boxes of stuff that's going to be thrown away. And then we have, during COVID, we've been expanding our justice garden, call them food justice gardens, helping people have access to a little land to grow some food for themselves in these perilous times. So, go ahead. If you go there to visit, which I'd welcome you to Starksboro, Vermont, about 20 miles from Burlington, if you've heard of Burlington, Vermont. If you go there, you get to stay in a yurt. And private bath. Just doesn't get any better than this. That's my associate, Pete. We also, just last year, because of COVID, went to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. We always go to Alaska, to Denali National Park. You couldn't hardly get in Alaska last summer. I mean, bless their hearts, they were just trying to be safe up there. So I said, what's most like Denali National Park? I thought Yellowstone. So there's Old Faithful, of course. You know a bison when you see one. just to give the relative size of things. So we're going back to Yellowstone this summer, as I mentioned in my talk. There's a bison taking a bath. If I had kids in the crowd, you're getting a chuckle out of it too. I put some of these in thinking there might be some kids in the crowd, and maybe there are watching at home, but the bison getting his bath in the morning. And just an interesting story here. This is an invasive species, those thistles. They're called Canada thistles, but they didn't really originate in Canada. They originated in Europe and got brought to Canada by settlers, whatever. But the gophers really like them. And so the gophers will eat the roots, and they actually store up the roots underground for like wintertime food. The grizzly bears have such good sense of smell, they can smell these caches of food under the ground and go down and get them and grab a few gophers while they're down there. They say a grizzly can smell a kill, like a dead elk or something, 20 miles downwind. That's the sense of smell. 8 times the power of a bloodhound's nose. Okay, anyway, did we see elk? We haven't seen wolves, but they're there, and they've reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone about 30 years ago because they'd been killed off over the years by trappers and farmers and all that stuff. And the problem was the elk were overmultiplying because there weren't any wolves around. And they're just hanging around the streams, eating all the grass and trees and everything around the streams, which then affected the beavers. In fact, beavers had pretty much been extirpated in some parts of the park because there were no trees to make their dams, there were no saplings for food and for whatever else beavers use all that stuff for. But now that the wolves are back, the elk are having to keep moving. And it gives the stuff a chance to regrow along the stream banks. And now in the one area of the park where there were no beaver, there are 9 colonies now. So, there's a plan here about life. And when you interrupt the plan, it affects things all down the food chain. So good for everybody. And now just a picture of some of the beaver lodges or dams there in one part of the park. It's just Yellowstone. Some of you probably been to Yellowstone, so we won't dwell on this too much. Or you've seen pictures in National Geographic that are better than mine. So anyway, we go there. There's our group from last summer. And it wasn't too crowded, especially if you get to a place early in the morning. We kind of had Lower Falls to ourselves. So that was kind of cool. All right, here we go. We also work with the Gwich'in people up in Alaska. We're going there this summer, one of our trips. And you heard the news a week and a half ago that President Biden has put a hold on the leases for drilling oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And these are the people that have been fighting against that drilling up there, and finally they're getting their voices heard. The caribou, they migrate. It's a long story how this works. But anyway, that's Sarah James on the right. She's a Gwich'in spokeswoman. There are some young women in the community. They usually dress like the young women at your church this morning, but on special occasions they wear the caribou skin. And we work with the Dene people out in New Mexico, otherwise known as Navajo. So we learn about the fracking, and you people in Pennsylvania know something about fracking, but we learn about the fracking going on out there. We do some small service projects where we're installing a solar panel there. We learn about the guy on the right who was sent off to a boarding school when he was in elementary school, and you know how the Indians were treated back then. We were trying to wash the native out of them, basically. And then the bottom left is a young woman who, when the fracking started, she realized her land and her people were at risk. Her name is Kendra Pinto. So she's stepping up to sort of defend the land and the people against the fracking interests. And there's lots of them. The state, because they make a lot of money off the fracking permits. The federal government allows the permits. Some of the Navajo people themselves have sold off their land rights. And so they're facing a lot to try to keep their land and their people together. All right, and COVID hit them. The Native communities, what did they say? The death rate among Native communities, I think, was 4 times that of non-Natives in the United States back in last spring. Not this spring, but last spring. They've since recovered. They've done a pretty good job, actually, of getting vaccinated. Part of the problem is this neighboring states haven't done as good a job. And there's flow between people. You don't stop people from flowing between states. And so it's been a bit of a problem lately for the Navajo. That's Marlene on the right. That's Hazel and Willie, who we put in that solar panel for a moment ago. So we sent out COVID relief twice. Once, food, firewood, hygienic materials, and money for grave diggers, because people were dying and they didn't have anybody to pay the grave diggers. That was back May before last. And then also most recently we sent out money for protective gear for Marlene. She's a community health worker and she didn't have protective gear. So we raised most of this on Facebook and through our email campaigns. And so we raised a total of about $3,000 for the Dene people over the last year. We sent money to the Amazon rainforest. We have partners of a bunch of different native groups in the Amazon rainforest, and we've sent food relief. We don't send the food, of course. We send the money to our partners, and they buy the food. And one of the ironies is they live in the rainforest where you'd think there's a lot of food, but they've been pushed back by the oil companies and others. They don't have their lands like they used to. And they've had to get into the money economy. So they grow cocoa, coffee, bananas to sell. Well, when COVID hit, all that shut down. So people in the rainforest were food insecure, so we sent some stuff down. And we also sent some money for long-term food stability to these native communities, helping them have the skills and the tools to build other kinds of gardening prospects there in the rainforest so they can make it through these tough times in the future. Off to, if this were a bunch of grade school kids, I'd say, what continent are we on now? And they'd all say Africa, because the zebras are a giveaway. Anyway, there's some zebras, elephants. I have things I talk about with all these pictures with grade school classes. The elephants, for instance, there were 12 million elephants in Africa in 1800. There are 350,000 now. So I can't even do the math on what a percentage drop that is, but it's 95% drop or something like that. Anyway, giraffes, Cape buffalo. I'm going to tell you a little something about this picture. This is in Akagera National Park in Rwanda. So we're in the park and we're with a ranger. He's riding with us back through. And you see the oxpecker birds on the back of the buffalo. He told us something I'd never heard before. He said these animals, they're all looking out for the big predators, the cats, the lions, the cheetahs, the leopards, but they look out for each other. The giraffe are like the periscopes. The zebras can see really well. The buffalo can't see worth nothing, but they can hear and smell well. And then the birds, they're gone at the first sign of something rustling in the grass. They call it shared vigilance, looking out for each other. You know, we have so much to learn from the animal world, frankly. So, a quick story here. These are pygmy people, Batwa. This is actually people in I don't know that these are Church of the Brethren people, but we work with a Church of the Brethren pastor in Rwanda to reach out to the pygmy people. They were driven from their forest homes a couple of decades ago. So they also are having trouble, food insecurity and all that stuff. COVID hit and they couldn't do their day labor jobs. They couldn't do cross-border trade with Congo because the borders were closed because of COVID. And so we sent, I don't know, I guess $2,000 or something, maybe twice, for food relief for pygmy communities. But the long-term solution is to get them land of their own. So in our fall campaign this past fall, we called it A Place of Their Own. Etienne, our pastor friend there, said what these women really need is some land, and I found 7.5 acres for $7,500. We put it on our wish list of things last fall that we were raising money for, which eventually came to $43,000 for all the things. But on this one, we raised it. And those women, they're dancing. They're dancing in the potato fields. I've seen pygmies dance. This is pygmy. So I think they're doing the mashed potato. Rachel probably knows how to do that. I've forgotten. But anyway, they're dancing. And so to have their own land, then next time there's a pandemic, they have food for their families and they can sell things.
Are potatoes native to?
Well, of course, they're native to South America.
But not Africa.
Not Africa. But they've been imported to Ireland, to to all around the world, and they grow really, this is in the highlands, because the potatoes began in the highlands of South America, the Andes. They grow really well in the highlands of Rwanda. So
is there a native plant that they could?
Well, there are native things. I think of cassava, which is the root crop. Of course, I don't even know if that's native to Africa. I don't know where it's native to. They grow a lot of it. I don't know the answer to your question. I'm sure there are people who've been living there for, centuries. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what's behind your question. I don't know the answer to it. Part of it is populations increases so much that maybe, and their land has decreased, so you've got to get more from a given parcel of land. They were hunters and gatherers. Oh, I have an elephant story. They told us how the pygmies hunt the elephants. I'm thinking, pygmies hunt elephants? We found an old man in a village who told us the story. He said, yes, we'd find the herd of forest elephants. We'd see which way they would run if they were spooked. We'd go up ahead of them, put our spears in the ground at a diagonal with the point up, go behind the elephants, spook them that direction, they would impale themselves on the spears. So that's how food was procured in the old days. You're welcome. Thanks for the question. South Sudan, that's where we're going. We've been working in South Sudan for really since 2007 as an organization. Of course, the Church of the Brethren has been there much longer than that, but we as a New Community Project since 2000. Typical homestead in South Sudan. They still have conflict going on. You know, they broke away to become their own country almost 10 years ago now, but they've been, the president and the vice president have been fighting and their ethnic groups, so it's a problem. So one of the things we did last fall was raise money for women's groups that are working against violence in society, both domestic violence and soldier violence. And you see them laughing there. All right, can you see in the mirror behind them, in the window, there's a woman in pink in the mirror. She's standing behind me, holding me up. So I couldn't get them all in the frame of my cell phone. So I'm leaning backwards, and then I had two women behind me. I kept going further back, and they were holding me up as I took the picture. That's why everybody's laughing. Guaranteed to get a laugh out of a crowd. Although I wasn't doing it to get the laugh, I was doing it to get the picture. But there's one of them. Okay, next. And I told them to turn their backs on domestic violence so we could read their shirts. Unite together to end violence against girls and women, or something like that. So we built a school there. You guys may have helped us a couple of years ago, built a school in South Sudan for girls that has 600 girls going there now. There's another school that we didn't build. These are boarding schools. Another school we didn't build, but we give scholarships to all these girls and others there. It's in another part of South Sudan. COVID hit. All the schools closed. All the girls went home. But these girls couldn't go home because if they went home, they were subject to forced marriage. At 12, 13, 14 years old, some old guy with cows and goats who will pay off the parents, not pay off, but it's the dowry price, and they'll marry off their young daughters. So they were stuck on campus. Nobody else there but the headmistress, and you don't want to mess with the Catholic nun. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, the headmistress was there, but they were running out of stuff. So we had a Facebook campaign last April, a year ago, and raised $2,000 to send toothpaste and soap and shoes and hygienic materials and whatever they needed to make it through till schools open again. And in Congo, next door, well, yeah, it is next door, kind of. Yeah. Anyway, COVID, of course, and you had to have a mask to go out in public, to do anything, to go shopping, to do anything. But who can afford a mask? So they wanted us to send money, and to go to school, that's schoolgirls, they want us to send money, or they asked for money to buy masks. I said, we have trained women in tailoring projects in Congo. What if we provide the materials, you pay the women to make the masks, and then they kept making the masks after all the girls and everybody had them and selling them on the market. So they made income. I just thought that was, trying to make lemonade out of lemons or something like that, or whatever. And climate change, of course, is a huge issue. And this isn't related to COVID, but it happened last fall. Floods from the Nile River. 600,000 people were displaced. So in Virginia, we've had a very dry spring. But although last year was the wettest year on record, so it rains, it pours, it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. And it's a big climate change, that's the indicators. But there it flooded, and so people, these are tukels, the mud homes, you can imagine what floods do to mud homes. So there are lots of single women and elderlies without homes, and there they are, just people just trying to make it to safety during the floods. So last fall we probably raised, one congregation, the Indian Creek congregation in Pennsylvania themselves raised several $1,000s. We probably raised $8,000 or $10,000 to help rebuild these homes for these women and families. So there's my friend Pete in Vermont. Taona from Malawi was in Vermont a year and a half ago, met us, liked the work we were doing, said you must come to Malawi. So Tom Benevento from our Harrisonburg site and I went there May before last. Just about a year ago now, we were there in Malawi. That's a baobab tree, which they call it the tree of life because it gives you fruit. The leaves can be used for medicine. In the rainy season, it stores up so much water that you can tap it for water in the dry season. Who would have thought? Anyway, but it's also not got friends because of deforestation, which I'll tell you about in a second. When we were there May before last, they were down to a meal a day. If you have a chance to watch the movie, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, probably based on a book, I don't really know. It was set in Malawi 10 years ago. They were down to a meal a day because of climate change. The monsoon rains are failing them. That's the bottom line here. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but it has driven them to charcoal production. What else are you going to do to make money to feed your family? You cut down the trees and make charcoal. That's how this works. And there's charcoal out for sale by the road. But and so we've got reforestation going on there. We have what we call a Million Tree Campaign. We've pledged to plant 100,000 trees a year for the next 10 years. And 20,000 of them are going to be right here in Malawi in the women's group. So when these women, once they can relearn the gardening skills in a climate world, which Tom is working with them some on, and they're working on themselves with irrigation strategies and all this stuff, they need to have a place to sell their produce, and they live 15 miles from the main road. And you've got to go to the road because that's where cars are, and that's where people have money if you're going to sell your stuff. So we're going to help. We raised this last fall $12,000 or more to help them build a market stand out on the road so they can take their stuff out there. We're going to start taking it by bicycle. We'll see how that works. But cars are tricky. They break down. You've got to rent them from some big town, and that costs you money, your overhead. So we'll see how this works, but we're going to do that. And any women who are involved in the marketing project have to plant trees, too, as part of the deal. While we were there, we also learned about the girls walking 7 to 14 miles to school. I got the idea at that moment for a program we started called A Girl and a Bike. So we're raising money to buy bicycles and give a little scholarship to girls. For $110, you get both, a bicycle and a scholarship. So we've sent over enough money, probably for 200 and some girls now, to do that. And then there are girls who go 30 and 50 miles away to high school to get to better high schools. So go to the next one. They were renting rooms in the community, kind of unsupervised. I mean, not that they're rowdy, but there's some insecurity there, and just sleeping on the floor, and you've got a good little crowded place that you're living. There's your restroom. I don't know how easy you'd rest in that restroom. So when did we do this? Last fall. We raised, same campaign, we raised money for hostels. And there you see it. That's a picture from last week. It just went up. We built a hostel in each of those two schools, 30 and 50 miles from the villages, so the girls have a place to stay either on or near campus. And go next, and look at that toilet. Huh? We're talking high class here. We are so, and you see why I'm saying high class. You saw the other one. And they cost $2,500 a piece. We're actually still raising money on these. Okay, what's price of materials not only went up at our Home Depot, but around the world. And so they ran out of, once they built the toilets and the hostels, they also need to build kitchens because the girls cook for themselves and buy mattresses and beds. So we got another $10,000 campaign right now going on. We have a donor who gave us $50,000 from his retirement fund. He said half for your endowment fund and half for current needs, but I'd like to see if you can use as much as you can to match funds, like matching gifts. So he's going to give us $5,000 if we can raise $5,000 toward the $10,000. And brethren like a deal. And all of us like a deal. Our network's not just Church of the Brethren people, but everybody likes a deal. So we have the restrooms and the hostels taken care of. We need the kitchen, which are $2,500 a piece, and the mattresses, which are a lot, and the beds, bunk beds. There, I just have a picture of, those are from another school, but just to show you what we're talking about. And the kitchen, all right, that's a show and tell you about the kitchen. If you don't have a kitchen, that's where you're cooking. So anyway, that kind of stuff. We have a new project in Nigeria. Since I saw you guys last, I got an email out of the blue, which I do. Any groups like ours, your congregation probably gets emails out of the blue asking for help for various things. Here, they were looking for help with reforestation of mangroves along the Niger Delta, in the Niger Delta, where Nigeria meets the sea, and the mangroves have been cut down for firewood, for farming, for all kinds of stuff, and yet they are go to the next. They're wondrous. They're wondrous. I don't know if that looks wondrous to you, but they stabilize the soil against sea level rise. They stop erosion. They are like habitat for all kinds of creatures. They also sequester 4 times the carbon of the same amount of rainforest, because they do it in the roots and the soil. The rainforest all does it up here in the biomass, and there's only so much of that you can do, but their roots and stuff go so deep, 4 times the carbon. So they're like, one of the solutions to climate change is to reforest areas that have been deforested of mangroves. So they're working on it. We gave them $10,000, part of our Million Tree campaign. We gave them $10,000 about 2 months ago. They'll use that to plant 20,000 trees. So, yeah. And they do teaching groups, families, and women how to build wood-conserving stoves. Because if you want to keep the mangroves from, like I said in my sermon a while ago, we got climate change kicking in. Nobody's telling us to drive less. Why not work at the demand side as well as the other side? Here, they're teaching them how to build wood-conserving stoves, which use a lot less wood, 5 times less wood than an open fire. So that'll cut down on the deforestation. And they're working with school groups to educate the masses, educate the kids about the importance of the mangroves, why we need to protect them, all this stuff. So they have a holistic approach, is what I'm saying. So it's not in the Church of the Brethren area. That's way up north, but we're down in the coastal area. But Church of the Brethren people have some familiarity with Nigeria, of course, and so. But we're working with a separate group in a separate place. We hope to visit them next year. A couple pictures from Myanmar, and yeah. You've heard what's going on in Myanmar. February 1st, my father's birthday, God rest his soul. February 1st, the military overthrew the democratic government because they claimed fraudulent elections. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody. Anyway, they overthrew the government, and the people have taken to the streets, often led by young women, because the military put Aung San Suu Kyi, the female leader of the government, under house arrest, and these young women took that personally. So they're in the streets. And they're using psychological warfare. They hang their garments, women's garments, they hang them over the streets because the soldiers think if they pass near women's clothing, it takes their masculinity away. Yes. I mean, these myths sometimes come in handy, you know what I'm saying? So they hang their sarongs and all that stuff on the streets to keep the soldiers at bay. I just thought that was so cool. And there's my friend Mo. He's one of the church members. We work with a Baptist group in Myanmar. We work with all kinds of groups all around the world, whether they're Christian or not, or Baptist or not, whatever. In this case, they're Baptists. And he's holding a picture of Aung San Suu Kyi, which is probably against the law right now because she's technically persona non grata. And he just wrote me the other day. I posted it on Facebook, if any of you are Facebook friends of mine. Anyway, he said, people are really struggling here now. He said, we can't get money out of the banks. He said, we can't get relief down to any of the areas where we're working with communities. It's a very difficult. He said, I'm worried about civil war. That's what he said. I said, let us know if there's anything we can do, but there's only so much we in the United States can do. Even I would wire them money, but they're not sure they can get the money out of the bank to help the women's groups we work with, which I've got a picture of for you. There's the women's groups we work with down the Delta. This was pre-COVID. But they've just found a new lease on life with the microloan projects that we support down there. And it's just amazing, really. And then this woman, Sister Anna Rose Tamang. The police were chasing some of the protesters. The protesters ran into the clinic where Sister Anna Rose works. They were coming in after them, guns bared. She went out in the street to meet them before they could get in. She knelt down in front of them. And you can see that these are probably Buddhist soldiers, and she's Catholic. They also knelt. There's a respect, interreligious respect in some other countries that we don't always find in our own country, frankly. But the Buddhist soldiers, police, are kneeling down in front of her as a Catholic religious person. They said, we're just coming in to get these kids. She said, please, they've been through so much trouble. She said, sister, we have to do what we have to do. She said, if you have to kill someone, kill me. I mean, Catholics get a bad rap around the world for many things. I've seen so many Catholic leaders around the world willing to risk their lives for their people. The police left. Phew. Whew. I think that's all I'm going to do. I probably had, I don't know what else pictures, but you've been really good sports. But that's a final picture from Myanmar. What's next anyway? Yeah, rainforest. This was kind of for the kids. I thought if some of the kids stayed around, I'd do the rainforest pictures. But we go down to the Ecuadorian Amazon and have a fine experience every year when we can. But so you have any questions, comments about any of those things that I shared here? We raised about $60,000 in COVID relief. We don't usually do that kind of stuff. That's, emergency disaster work. But when your partners say, we're struggling here, what are you going to do? And our people, our network wanted to respond. I think people last year, so much was going wrong with our own society. I think people were looking for something positive to do, honestly. And I think we were providing a service. Not that that was our intention, but it's sort of providing a service for our network to give them a chance to do something that made them feel good for a moment in the midst of all the turmoil we had in our society last year. So anyway, sorry, questions, comments?
I just had a question, Dave, about going back to the food business, and I don't even know how to ask it. But if we, shouldn't we be planting things that are native to those regions?
She's asking, for those of you at home, shouldn't we be planting things? We do that with our reforestation projects, I will say that. And that includes fruit trees and things that are native to the area.
And I get that sometimes the native plants take longer to grow than some.
But the real answer to your question is, we're listening to our partners on the ground. They say, here's what we're growing. I mean, the pygmy women, we didn't send them the potatoes. We bought the land for them. They planted the potatoes. It's really up to them. I mean, Tom Benevento, who was a specialist in sustainable development, my partner in Harrisonburg, who lived in Guatemala for many years, knows a lot about traditional foods and whatever. He may suggest to someone, if he's in a setting like that and he has an idea he's seen happen some other part of the tropics that has been successful. Well, of course, I'm saying some other part of the tropics, so that still doesn't get to your indigenous. He does ask them, whenever he's working with these groups, he'll say, tell me what you remember from your past. What were you planting when you were young? And now, for the most part, the state agricultural colleges in their country and ours, they've come in and said, no, here's how you grow stuff. You need fertilizers, you need pesticides, you need these genetically modified seeds. I mean, that's how they've been taught for the last, I want to say some decades probably. So Tom tries to give them the opportunity to remember what it was. And that's why I asked the pygmy guy, what was life like in the forest? That's where I got the elephant story. But it's really, in the long run, it's up to them to decide what they're going to grow. Yeah. Not to say we can't share ideas, and someone like Tom would. And frankly, our women's projects in Myanmar, they didn't work with women. I shared the idea with our partner from the Baptist Church, the work we were doing in South Sudan and a few other places with women, and they thought, and now it is gangbusters. So we'll share ideas, but you also have to, as you know, respect the local wishes in these things.
You might be interested to know that some of our money that individuals here in this country did find its way to you in an indirect route. I had a friend who said to me, I don't really need this money that's coming from the government. She said, can you suggest, and I suggested here in your community. And
Bless your heart.
that's what she did.
She was just saying that she had a friend when we got the COVID relief checks who didn't know what to do with her money, and she suggested send it to us. Feel free, friends. Well, and we've been getting a lot of, as I mentioned a moment ago, I think, about the $50,000 from IRA distributions that people have planned well, and they're not anticipating big crises, and that's another avenue. We're getting unexpected money. And I feel honored, really, in both those cases, because it's money that you sort of earned or deserved with COVID or the retirement, and yet people choose to share it with you. And that's, I feel that way about anybody who sends us money. They work for that money somehow in their life. And so we feel honored to get that, but especially in some of these other cases. So, well, thank you so much. That's how we do it. I mean, that's how we all do it in this world, but one person linked to another person, to the story I told about Nancy Heisey from this congregation and my circle of events in my own life that led me to meet her and led her to that other opportunity. You never know how these things are going to play out. You try to keep your eyes and ears open for the opportunities that present themselves. And yeah. Well, you people, you're great. Thank you for being here today. And thank you, any of you out there in TV land or internet land listening to us today. Thank you very much. And we'll see you around. 'Twas a pleasure. 'Twas a pleasure.